if you were to buy a 10-year government bond today, it's about 0.75. So 75 basis points for a 10-year. It's gone up a little bit. It was about 0.65%. So still, if you're trying to earn a high return in bonds, it's tough to do. If you look at your tip fee bond diversity down below, overall, you're getting about 2% with your bond portfolio. So you still have a nice blended mix of positions there that are doing great things for the tip fee fund. You've got about half the portfolio there in CDs. So CDs there in aggregate are getting you about 1.4%. You've got some corporate bonds, which make up about a quarter of it. We've been adding into the Dodge & Cox Income Fund. This has been a fantastic fund for not only for municipal clients, but nonprofits, individuals. It's a fantastic fund. It's a great environment because Dodge & Cox is one of the best funds out there in the marketplace today. They're able to buy up a lot of these corporate bonds before Nick and I can even have access to them. So it's nice to have an actively managed fund to help you, one, with diversification, but also to help kind of complement what you already have. Dodge & Cox pays you about 2.85%. They're all investment grade bonds. So it's nice to have boots on the ground, active management in a rather challenging space in the fixed income world. So you've got about 5% in inflation protection there too with a TIP, a treasury inflated protected piece. That's about 5% of this. So we've been adding a little more into that as we see fit. The coastal resources portfolio, although it says there that you've got about 21% cash, that's now closer to 10 or 11% cash. That's able to produce about $33,000 in annual income right now in today's environment, which is pretty decent. Still have about $1.5 million there, 1.517 in the coastal portfolio. If you look at that diversity set up in a similar manner, we're mostly using funds here. Again, expecting rates to remain low for a considerable amount of time. Using funds here to help provide you with a return in the bond environment, but also providing you with a higher level of diversity. You can see you've got 5 major pieces there that are working well together. You've got a little more in inflation protection there. You've got some Vanguard. We're using indexing here to help you invest in a particular area of the market. Got some Dodge & Cox there, which makes up about a third of it. And then a little bit of international to help provide you with diversity outside the U.S. So that makes up about 15%. And the total amount that you have invested there is about 1.2 million. So again, it's at some point in time in the TIP fund, obviously we want to continue looking at fixed income, helping you with your investment policy statement. Not in any hurry again to invest in equities until we have a firm grasp on what we're doing with the stocks and also with your investment policy statement. What questions do you have from the group?
Bob.
Thank you.
You're muted.
Sorry, I'll repeat. I'm going to be nitpicky for a second, and I apologize up front. But it would help if the names that the first gives its investment accounts would track the names that we give the investment accounts on our balance sheet. And I don't really care who changes what they're doing, but it would nice, and you can tell by looking at the amounts, generally speaking, but it just makes it easier when you're reviewing the information to match things up more quickly. So that's the nitpick. The question I had regarding the investments is you are investing in bond funds instead of, by and large, instead of individual bonds. Investing in bond funds kind of mitigates against staggering the investments. You're sort of at the mercy of the investment structure of the fund, as opposed to creating your own structure of staggered maturities. What's the trade-off there? And what's our potential for loss in the event we have to pull out of a bond fund for whatever reason?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thanks, Bob. Yeah, a couple quick questions. And to your first point, the next time I send a chart out like this, I'll make sure it matches everything that you have there on your end. So I apologize for any confusion there. And as far as the individual bonds versus mutual funds, I mean, it was certainly a little easier to invest in CDs and individual treasuries last year when zero, and we could basically delineate between the different maturities. Now, if I try to buy a 5 or 6 year CD, for example, you're basically getting 0.5% for even a 5 year. And might as well be zero if I invest in it less than 1 year. So, but by investing in a mutual fund, it allows us to capture areas of the market that we can't necessarily access as easy from our perspective. But also it's providing you with a nice diversified way of investing in funds in an easier manner. We're keeping these funds relatively short. So when you pull together the duration or the sensitivity to interest rate risk or interest rate changes, it's really short. So we don't anticipate a huge spike up in rates. It very well could happen, but we're not investing in very long-term bond funds here. It'd be one thing if the average maturity were 10, 15, 20 years out. Here, the average maturity is 4 to 5 years or even less, and the duration is around that too. So that means if we were going to see a 1% climb in rates, your sensitivity to price risk on the downside is relatively low. So that's the last thing we would want is to put you in a position where if you need to sell these bonds, you're going to sell them at a loss. These are kicking out an attractive level of interest there too, to you, to MRC and to Coastal. So even if you were to see a slight drop in price on the downside, it's more than offset by the income you're getting with these funds. And again, these are all investment grade bonds too. So it's not like we're taking bonds and investing in the low quality or junk market as well. So the risk is low. It's a great way to complement what you have. And again, I'm not completely disregarding, giving away the idea that I still want to invest in individual bonds. Just there really have not been a lot of opportunities out there. Returns are low. Really not a lot available, honestly. And that's the benefit of bringing in a Dodge & Cox fund to help kind of fill that void and to invest in corporate bonds that they have access to that Nick and I, quite frankly, have a hard time accessing. Nick, anything there you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you said, but the one thing I would add on top of that too, with the Dodge & Coxes and Vanguards of the world, being able to get access to institutional markets, and as Pete alluded to, getting bonds before they even make it down to us to access. They also have the benefit, they are buying enormous amounts at a given time. So where we might be buying for an individual account $50,000 worth of a bond, they're buying $50 million worth of a bond. So from a spread standpoint, they're getting much better pricing. If you're in a more normal rate environment, as we were in a few years ago, a few basis points of spreads may not make a difference. But in the low rate environment we're in today, the fact that they are able to get much better pricing than we are, that few basis points relative to where the 10-year yield is on the U.S. Treasury is much more significant. So in a low rate environment, that pricing power that they have access to does really benefit you by a much higher relative yield overall.
Anything else? Bob, are you all set?
Yes, I am. Thank you. I thought the explanations were very adequate.
All right. George, do we have any particular direction for folks that you need to talk about, or are we just holding the course?
Right now, it looks like we're holding the course. I think, I did mention in the asset management letter, I went through some of the numbers involved in starting up the MRC stepping in as the entity that on an interim basis is managing the diversion from joining members to backup facilities, paying the facilities, and collecting the tip fees. And so, that did involve a need for some money to cover the startup cash flow, because the bills come due before the payments come in, and there's a lag in time there. It looks like at this point, and Michael can step in as well, but from what we have, we don't need any additional cash flow to management. The transfers that were made in second quarter are adequate or at third quarter that were authorized at the last meeting are adequate to cover the cash flow needs. There always is the potential for changes, but at this point, we do have working capital to handle that, and if there's some change, we'll have time to go back to the board to address. Okay. So there's no specific recommendation on that, and similarly for transfers to the operating fund.
So Peter got a copy of your asset management letter in the packet that I provided for this meeting, and should be able to reach out to Mike if he has specific questions.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That was very helpful.
Yeah, I guess the other part of that is and it's helpful to see the allocation of bonds and cash, and it looks like there's cash in the accounts that might be drawn to bonds. So we seem to be okay without needing to make any specific transfers at this point.
Okay.
If anything changes, let us know.
That we can absolutely do. Bob.
Thanks. I just had a quick question on the detail of the accounts that George has given us. It appears we have 5 accounts with the first, and we still have a small account with Bangor Savings Bank. And it looks to me as though the first is really managing just one account for us in terms of handling the investments, and that's the tip fee what we call the tip fee stabilization account. And I guess you're handling the coastal account as well, what we call the custody account. I think you're calling the coastal investment account.
So I want to be really clear that the coastal investment account is our money.
Yes.
Which is why I would love to rename that something different.
You guys will figure something out, something imaginative and creative.
Yep.
Yeah.
There are 3 other accounts that have a combined around $500,000 in them, a little more. Then they're basically, with the exception of the custody account, there are 2 custody accounts. One with a small amount, $240,000, and the other one, the larger amount, which we're required to hold for coastal. I guess my question is, why have we bifurcated that into 2 separate accounts?
Go ahead. I think I can give a quick answer, George, and let's see if it works, okay? I don't want you to get mired down in the names. What we've got that we're operating out of right now are 3 distinct accounts, and we do that to keep George happy. One is an operating account, which is where we pay our monthly payables, payroll, that kind of stuff. The second one is where we pass through project specific tip transactions that were always separate, and we're used to seeing that go through the custody account. The operating budget stabilization fund, which is actually the third one, is there. We transferred that in with like $5,000 in it, but that is where Mike is putting all of the payments that we receive for tip fee that we are billing our members, that we then turn around and transfer out to pay waste management and perk. So every day, Mike and our bookkeepers are depositing the checks we receive from our members, and then twice a month, Karen and I are making cash transfers out of those accounts to the two major vendors. Yes.
So if I could make a suggestion here, the operating budget account appears to me to be purely a receipts account, and I love that. I love what you're doing. It is a control mechanism. It's easily audited. You know the money's coming in, and when it goes out, you know exactly what it's being used for. So I would suggest we call that a receipts account or an operating receipts account or something like that. So we know it has a very, very special purpose. Yeah, then the operating account seems to me that's where you pay your expenses out of after you've transferred money in from the receipts account. And again, I'm not sure what the small custody account is for. Maybe you could explain that again, please.
George?
Yeah, okay, couple of things. First of all, the 48307 held at Bangor Savings Bank is again just a residual amount pending transfer to the First National Bank. There's only one custody account, which happens to be in two places at this point. And so that when that last money is transferred over, it'll be in one. The other one is, which is shown on the sheet as a coastal asset allocation account, is actually has a name that's referred to in the site lease and the master waste supply agreement, which is the name we ought to use, which is the cash collateral account or the cash collateral agency account. Okay, so that's the money that was originally $3 million held to secure certain obligations of the MRC under the master waste supply agreement and the site lease. That's money from which the $1.5 million was taken out as the interim loan. And so that's why that balance is now $1.5 million. And so that was money that the MRC would put in, and the MRC will eventually take out unless it's used to secure or to pay for a secured obligation. So that has its own life and really shouldn't be used for anything else other than what is set forth in the documents. Okay, so that's separate from the custody account, which also is referred to in the, I believe in the master waste supply agreement, though not in the site lease, which is used for the other purposes. That's where the distribution money goes in and comes out. That's where money to pay for the securing of the facility has been managed as well. So there are two purposes to that one. And again, yeah, as you observed, we are keeping that separate from the operating budget stabilization account, which had a different purpose previously, is being used, we hope, on a very temporary basis to pay the tip fees and accept the tip, to pay disposal fees and accept the tip fees. And our hope is that very shortly that that account won't be needed for that purpose when someone else steps in to fulfill that function. So I think that's trying to distinguish between the accounts. And I know it's a little bit confusing, but you know, we've tried to keep the accounts separate so that Michael handles the daily and weekly transactions, and at the end of the month when the statement comes out, I can look at what went in and out of this per the statement and balance them with what Michael shows going in and out per the books, and then we have some internal control and a balancing mechanism on a monthly basis. So
what I'm hearing as a basis of this conversation, or as the outcome from this conversation, is that we're going to change the operating budget account name to the operating receipts account. I didn't hear any problem with that. Kathy, anybody? You all right? Yep.
Again, if we're going to do that, then we need to make sure that we go back through all the other documents where there's a reference to the operating budget stabilization account by name and make sure that those documents reflect the new name and some of those.
I would argue, George, that we're talking about a report that's generated on Excel
Okay,
for the board that Mike does. So I think we can change the name so we don't confuse board members.
okay, that's fine.
And the same thing to change it to the cash collateral account, the 1.5 from waste management, from First Wealth Management.
Yeah.
Tony,
When the dust settles, could we get a written summary of these accounts? What the name used to be, what the name is now, and what the monies are used for?
yeah, I think George did that for us, so I can go back and pull
No,
that.
I'd like it
memo.
in writing, please, because
Well,
my
no, I meant George, Tony. George wrote a significant memo to us that explained all of that a
if
year
that was
ago.
longer
so
than a day ago, then it's gone.
That's all right. Well, I'm just
You'll-
gonna ask Mike to find it and resend it to the board.
Thank you very much.
Sound good? Mike, did you get that?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm making a note now. Thank you.
Thank you.
And could you pencil in the new names now as well? Thank you. It's been a
Bob.
good week already.
Yeah, I note that what we call the custody account number ending in 5369 is the same account as the tip fee stabilization account, which also ends in 5369.
No, 5359 and 5369.
Oh, sorry, I misread. My apologies. Thank you.
That's okay.
Ah!
Tony,
Now I don't, thanks Bob for giving me that cushion to fall on. I do remember vaguely George putting that together, but I still would like another copy, please.
yeah, not a problem. We can make that happen.
Thank you.
I want to move us along. We don't normally spend the first half hour with Peter, so he is definitely we've gotten our money's worth today. I think we're all set. Very nice to meet you, Nick.
I was talking to your father, Peter. He seems well.
So
Oh,
we're going to continue
Thank you,
on.
Tony.
Here you go. Thank you.
We're going to
Thank you,
continue
everyone. Good to see
on.
you.
We are going to continue on and look at the budget. Mike has done a lot of work on reconciling the budget. You want to run people through it, Mike?
Yeah, Bob, did you have something?
I did have one more question, and I don't think it concerns the first. But I believe, my understanding is, and maybe I just don't understand, but my understanding is that we have something like $15 million put it away in various funds to keep us whole. Am I
We have-
misunderstanding?
Yeah, we have 7.8 million.
And that's it. There's no other.
There's no other.
Okay, thank you.
I wish we did.
What
If
you
you'd like
see
to
on your
donate
sheet?
it, we would take it.
Yeah,
I'll find out where that number is or where I saw it and come
Okay.
back to you with a request for explanation.
George?
yeah, just Bob, I mean, what you're looking at, the 15 million number is the statement of net position for the benefit, but that includes the value of the Hamden site improvements and costs, so it's a non-cash item. And it also includes the value of the 1.5 million loan principal payable and a few other non-cash items. So,
Thank
so that's the difference.
Yep, got it. Thanks, George.
All right, let's see if we can make it through the rest of this agenda.
So thank you, Sophie. I'll just give a high level and go over so this is a revised third quarter of where we're at. The very top part is the income. So as you go down the income, you can see that we're at 68% of where we should be. I will say that though, the lease payments have not been coming in from Coastal, nor has the shared services. So I have to have a talk with Jonathan on those when it comes to revenues coming in. We do have that 66,000 that was paid to us, so that was going to be helpful, but that was paid to us as part of our closing cost and our legal fees when we did the $1.5 million loan to Coastal. That's what was paid to us at closing for those fees. As you go down the payables, We are going over budget, and I'll go quickly through them. The couple of things that stick out are the health insurance, but that I got to talk to our bookkeeper on that. We had to make an extra payment because they had lost a check last year. We had wrote a check and the check got lost. So we had to stop payment on it and create another payment for that. So that was more or less a double payment. So I probably have to revise that, but I want to talk to the bookkeeper on how to do that. Workers' compensation, we went way over on because we did a new classification due to being out at the transfer stations and meeting with the members and not just being in the office. That had raised our workman's compensation, and that happened shortly after we'd already done the budget. The bookkeeping services are up, but they're actually a lot more reasonable than I thought they were going to be. Remember, I put all the billing together and get all the weight slips together, and then I send the bookkeeper a spreadsheet, and she runs the invoicing through her accounting system so that we can track the payable and receivables on that. Other than that, everything seems to be pretty much in line. I'm trying to make as many cutbacks as I can, so you'll see a lot of things are under. But down you'll see miscellaneous, and it's 7,000A, miscellaneous CRM loan expenses. And electronically, I have a click-on box that actually in detail lists what each expense is. And that's basically legal, consultant, and legal and consultant is all that is. And so that was an extra expense we did not budget for. And that should be reconciling with the top revenue line when we put our letter together on if we can recoup any of these costs at the time of the closing when the facility is purchased. I do have a recommendation for that line. We had moved over some funds to secure the facility, and we have been reimbursed. So we moved over $250,000 to secure the facility. That's the $240,000 that you're seeing in the custody account ending in 01. And we were reimbursed $184,908, $184,908.58 from the bondholder trustee for what we did to secure the facility and clean up. So my recommendation would be put that into the operational budget towards that expense down there on that line. That's a quick overview, Sophie. I don't know if there's any more you want to add to that or have for that, but that's what I have on the reconciled budget.
Karen.
So I just wanted to get clarification, Mike. So you're saying that we have essentially about $180,000 worth of reimbursement that we've received for expenses we incurred regarding securing the plant that's not showing up above in your income line. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I think it should show in the loan where we put the loan revenue line, because that's the offset where we're showing the expenses related to securing the building. It will make our budget look a lot better. Just saying.
Yeah, so then we'd have like 240 up there on the income line, right, to offset the 250 in expense. Yeah, yes. I like that.
I don't know that I'd want to put it in the loan revenue account though, because it's not strictly speaking related to that $1.5 million loan. I know it's a pain in the neck to create additional lines, but this is an item that could get stretched out. I mean, we've made quote unquote advances to the facility to keep it in good standing, and we're getting 180,000 back. Maybe we ought to have a separate revenue or income line that just indicates reimbursement of I almost want to call it an advance, an unsecured advance, because that's basically what it is. We advanced the money. It was unsecured. It wasn't a loan in the strict sense of the word. We didn't document it as a loan, but we've documented the advances we made to support the facility. I'd also put that on our balance sheet as a due from, as a receivable.
Yep. And I think what Mike was trying to get at too when he was talking about revenue is we've followed the accepted accounting practices because we've been billing the lease payments and the advocacy reimbursement. So we've billed it and accrued it as an accounts receivable. My question is, can it really legitimately stay there if we're not 100% sure we're going to get the money back? And what I don't want to do is book a whole bunch of accrued revenue that then leaves us with a big hole. I'd rather have a windfall, but that's just me.
That's why I'd prefer to handle it as a balance sheet issue, not an income statement issue. You book the advance, it's cash out, it's a reduction in cash, you get the money back, it's a reduction in the advance and an increase in cash. And at some point, we might have to create a reserve for money we don't think we're going to get back. But then it doesn't affect your income statement at all.
Yep.
And it really
I like that idea. Yeah. All right. Any other questions about the budget? When you look at this, if I was trending forward, we're going to be in the hole again. We are going to end up having to use our fund balance here. So just need to be aware of that. All right. Mike is doing a good job keeping us on track, I think.
Thank you.
We also put in the packets, on page 3 is our receivables with regard to dues. So the dues got billed, and most everybody, a lot of people, they just went out. So we're in process of getting payments.
And Sophie, if I can add, this was the round where it was the increase.
Yep. This we went from 125 to 150 per ton.
I know the amounts are small, but we have 3 towns that are over 90 days past due. What do you do?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, there is a mechanism. George can correct me if I'm wrong, but there used to be a mechanism that said if we didn't get paid, we would withhold the dividends that go out. So if members aren't paying us for things that they owe us, their tipping fee or their dues, I think the plan is when they get to that point, we're going to hold their dividends to make us whole.
Makes sense.
And then this shows the starting on page 5, you've got the summary with regard to tip fee. And you will see that Mike has been doing an incredible job getting things billed in a timely manner and then recording the payments. So that is working well. But he and I have also talked on the 60 to 90, over 90 day lines that we need to do some follow-up there. My understanding is the follow-up with the town of Hamden has already been done, and that was a significant one.
Are any of these in dispute at all? Did anybody come back and argued with us?
I haven't heard any arguments.
No.
Cool.
No. I think there's the occasional misbill, but that's just been rebilled. There's no dispute on that's not actually our tonnage or anything like that.
Okay.
My perk payment was approved Monday night.
Your MRC payment.
I didn't know which way. I was going to say MRC/perk, but yes, you know what I mean.
So, any questions about the budget, the receivables? We look good? All right. So, payables would be the next thing. Mike, you want to run us through that?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. It's pretty much a standard payables. like I said, the things that stick out right along is the bookkeeping service is up there, but we're doing our best to manage that. And of course, the attorney fees are up there. And what I do is I do break down the attorney fees and the consultant fees, and then I take whatever percentage is being used on what we're being billed for, and I put it in that line on the budget. Right now, it's currently as part of the loan line, but it would be as part of the, working towards a buyer of this facility. So I do break those apart so that we know exactly what we're spending on these additional costs that were occurring. But other than that, it's a pretty standard payables. It's 32,726.77. So there's really nothing there that's, out of the norm.
Questions for Mike? I like hearing that. Nothing out of the norm.
I gotta say, Mike is doing an amazing job too. It's not easy following all this stuff. And he's just,
And
Thank you.
if I can just say that the workload for your treasurer has significantly decreased, and yet there are lots of quick phone calls with updates or question, especially if there's a history question. It just feels like right now we've got a really good handle on the money, the process, the relationships. I can't say enough. I could not have continued doing what I was doing for much longer. This allows me to actually do my job, which is kind of cool.
Thank you.
So I stuck in my assumption based on no questions is that we're recommending that the board approve the
Yes.
bills. Okay. I stuck in George's asset management letter. You'll notice that they keep staying pretty long, pretty lengthy. But I didn't know if in the last, 10 minutes here, you might want to bring anything up, George, that you think you want the finance committee to think about before the board meeting.
I think at this point, I think, we have some new line items because there's been new types of financial transactions in the last 3 to 6 months because of the role that the MRC has been playing since the suspension of operations. But I don't know that there's anything that hasn't already been discussed to this point in terms of receivables and payables. I will point out that the financial statements that are prepared for the joint venture do acknowledge for example, the reimbursements received from the bondholders for facility costs and some of the other line items related to the new role that the MRC has been playing since May. Tip fees receivable are broken out. I have detail on disposal costs payable, and there are some other items like that. I don't know that there's, I think we've discussed everything to this point that's new in the other. So
Cool.
and I want to thank George for doing that. I mean, it made a big difference for me. Thank you.
I mean, the one thing is I did put in a new table to track the, and Michael and I had to develop a new system to coordinate on this in terms of tracking the disposal fees paid out and the payments of tip fees from the joining members. And then, so the table 4 is a new table that does that. And you can see there was about a $300,000 working capital need when we started up, which is what was moved in the last quarter. And going forward into fourth quarter, our tonnages typically go down because third quarter is high season. And so it means that the disposal costs will go down while the tip fees are still coming in from the higher season. So it's actually going to decrease our need for working cash in the fourth quarter as opposed to the third quarter. Now, third quarter was the opposite because we're just starting up. And again, second quarter tonnages were depressed due to COVID, and then they picked up a little bit in the third quarter. So when tonnages increase, then you pay disposal fees before you collect the tip fees. When tonnages decrease, then that need for working capital goes down a little bit, which is why there appears to be, we ought to be able to get through fourth quarter without making another transfer. There are always things that change, and we know that, but at this point, that's where we are, and we don't feel the need for recommendation at this particular meeting for that purpose.
Okay. So is there anything else that the committee wants to talk about, or are we going to give ourselves time to get a cup of tea and get ready for the board meeting? Kathy, I love the new do, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Karen?
Yes, Karen.
Just briefly, I wanted to remind us that I think we still, having read the minutes recently from the July meeting, we do need to memorialize the changes to Mike's contract in written form. So
Yes.
want to make sure that stays on the list and gets done at some point soon.
Karen, while you brought up the July minutes, when we get into the board meeting, that's going to be an agenda change. I didn't realize we hadn't done the July yet. So when we do the agenda part, we need to add those to it. I apologize for that.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. Thanks.
All right. So I'm going to call this meeting over, and then I'll pass it all over to Karen at 10.
Do we stay in this room? Like if I just stay here, or do I have to go to another room?
No, I think you're all set to stay right here.
Okay.
Hang out
I
right
would
here.
just encourage people to make sure that they're muted and maybe that their video is off.
Yeah. Kathy, go to the room down the hall.
We're just about ready to get started here. Mike, is there anybody that we're expecting that is not arrived yet? That you have noticed?
I don't know. There's so many squares.
I know, it seems like we got a pretty full slate, so.
And Jess, if there's any way of putting everybody together to make it easier for Jonathan on roll calls and stuff that has their video on, that would be great, so that at least I'm on 2 pages now and some of the boards on the second page. John, my question to you is, do you know if Sean's joining?
I got a note from Sean. I don't think she's going to be able to join. She's been tied up, but I can follow up with her as may be necessary.
If the board members could turn their cameras back on, that'd be great. That would help me kind of look and make sure everybody's here. There's Kevin. Kathy.
I think we have everybody.
I do too,
Yeah.
Karen.
I think I
do
saw
too.
everyone as well.
Great. Well, with that, I think I will call this meeting to order. This is the third quarterly board meeting of the MRC Board of Directors. I welcome everybody. Thank you very much for participating with us today. We're doing this in a Zoom meeting format, which is a little different from some of our other meetings. We're also streaming it live on Facebook and on the MRC webpage, I believe, as well as recording it. So, and John, do we need to call the roll? Should we call the roll to start off here?
I don't think that's necessary. We have to do a
Okay.
roll call if there's any votes, but unless there's a quorum doubted, I think we have a quorum, so I think we're good to go.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So the second item on the agenda then is approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes that we need to, or adjustments we need to make to the agenda?
Karen, yes, we need to add the July 22nd meetings as part of the agenda under the line for approval.
Okay, so item number 3, consideration of minutes, we'll do the July 22nd minutes as well as the other ones that we'll be considering. Very good. Any other changes or adjustments? All right. Seeing none. We'll just quickly review how the meeting will be conducted in this virtual format. Our votes will be conducted by roll call. I would remind folks to stay muted unless you are speaking. And I will say that we will be having a public comment opportunity towards the end of the meeting prior to the board going into executive session. And we'll be using the chat function so folks can indicate their interest in making a comment or asking a question using the chat function. And for board members and our consultants and others that have joined us, guests that have joined us, I can't see everybody, so you will likely need to use your microphone to indicate your interest in making a comment or asking a question. Since I don't think I have everybody on this one page, so I won't be able to see you raise your hand if you have a point that you'd like to make. So we'll do our best to manage this. It's nice to see this many participants, so we're happy about that. So our third item on the agenda is consideration of the minutes of the July 22nd regular meeting and the August 14th and September 23rd special meetings. I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Are there any comments or corrections that need to be made in any of those sets of minutes? Seeing none, we'll go for a vote. John, if you'll call the roll.
Sure. Dana,
Let me get on, there we go, yes.
Ralph, Kevin,
Yes.
Irene,
Yes.
all right, thanks, Irene. Bob,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Karen.
Yes. Thank you. Next item up is a report from George Aronson. This is our quarterly asset management report that covers the custody account, the tip fee and operating budget stabilization funds, cash collateral count, reserve fund update, and the third quarter joining member cash distribution. A very comprehensive report that George always puts together each quarter for us. And I would let folks know that copies of these reports are always available on the MRC website. I encourage you to check them out. Lots of good information. George.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So again, the third quarter asset management report, and attached to it are a unaudited balance sheet and statement of cash flow to reconcile, to make sure everything that the change in that position is reconciled with the excess of additions over deductions, which is the format that our auditor has recommended in past audits. Though this statement is not audited, we're looking, the audit would occur after the end of the year. Just briefly.
George?
Yep.
George?
Yes?
I would just like to ask you if you could really work hard to speak up a bit, that would be great.
Okay, is this better?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, I'll try to use a broadcast voice here. The letter itself goes through the accounts that are managed underneath the joint venture with the joining members, include the custody accounts, and we still have a residual balance held at Bangor Savings Bank in addition to money held at First National Bank. That account is being used both to pay the quarterly distributions as well as to pay amounts that are required in terms of expenses related to securing the facility's condition and ongoing compliance with environmental permits and licenses. And when there are reimbursements from the bondholders, that money would go back into the same account from which the expenses were paid, which is also that custody account. Just to highlight that number, 184,908.58 was received in reimbursements from the bondholders to reimburse amounts spent by the MRC in the third quarter. Accounts receivable is shown. Right now, the receivable is tip fees for MSW delivered from joining members to backup disposal facilities in the quarter, but not yet received. And again, we track that both on it as the funds come in and on a separate basis, looking at the bank statements through the quarter. Tip fee stabilization fund balance, which was about $5.7 million, and we had a report on that earlier. That's basically the balance from which where most of the MRC's funds reside, and to the extent there are transfers or needs in other funds, the money would come from the tip fee fund. Operating budget stabilization fund balance, about $126,000. Right now it's being held liquid, and the fund was used to pay disposal costs and to receive payment and tip fees. And so for that purpose, the fund had received an additional transfer of $300,000 from the tip fee fund as a source of working capital during the quarter. Looks like $300,000 has covered the need, and now that we've done this for a few months and we've gotten past the startup need for working capital, we're not projecting need for additional working capital during the quarter. Cash collateral account, which is $1.5 million plus a little bit of earned interest that's been retained. And then this is the account that was used to secure obligations under the site lease and the master waste supply agreement. And that's held at First National Bank in the name of Coastal for the benefit of the MRC for reasons set forth in the contracts, which I'm not going to go through now, but can be addressed if they need to be at a later point. We're still showing on the balance sheet the loan of $1.5 million provided to Coastal in February. Even though the repayment of that loan is overdue, its status is still not clear, and so we're going to retain that on the balance sheet until we have clarity, which may come in the fourth quarter. And finally, the site owned by the MRC has a book value of $6.2 million on the basis of past expenditures. So if you add that up, there's a total assets of about 16 million. And if you net out the distributions payable and other payables, then the net position of the joining members is a little bit over 15.6 million. Table 2 just reconciles the changes in balance sheet items through looking at revenues and expenses and comparing them to the change in the net position from the prior quarter. So that's the first part of the report, which is the financials. Any questions on what's been presented? Okay, let me go forward. The second part is table 3 shows the basis for the distributions payable by the MRC to the joining members under the terms of the joining agreement. And we're looking at a total of $158,796 $36, which is calculated in table 3 by joining member. Our method has been to fund the payments has been to transfer $125,000 per quarter from the tip fee stabilization fund. And again, we had set aside or designated internally $1.5 million over 36 months, and this is $125,000 is basically 3 months worth of that money. It should be known, since the third quarter is always and has typically been the quarter of the greatest MSW deliveries and generation in our joining members, and so that number is going to, the number, the 158, which is recommended, exceeds the 125 in the third quarter. Typically in the fourth quarter and the first quarter during the winter, that number goes the other way. Right now we are running a little bit higher in terms of distributions than we had initially budgeted, and we'll keep an eye on that. We may need to, at some future point, transfer a bit more money over that to cover the number, but at this point, it's still early enough in that process that, in our view, the transfer isn't needed. So just to recap the two recommendations, the first is to distribute $158,796.36 to joining members, which is per Exhibit B to the joining agreements, reflected in detail in Exhibit 3 to the letter. The second is to transfer $125,000 from the tip fee stabilization fund to the custody account in order to fund the distribution. So I'm happy to take questions.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to move the two recommendations that George just made and make a motion that we do what he's asking us to do.
Recommending, yes. We have a motion?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any questions for George or comments before we vote on that? All right. Hearing and seeing none. John, will you call the roll, please?
Sure, thanks, Karen. Dana,
Yes.
Ralph. I didn't hear you, Ralph.
Yes.
All right, thanks. Kevin,
Yes.
Irene, I think you're still on mute, Irene.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Bob,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
and Karen.
Yes. Thank you.
For the record, nobody has ever said they couldn't hear me on a Zoom call.
Thank you, George, for that information and for keeping track of all that for us, because it just seems to continually get more complicated. But you do a great job keeping it all straight for us. Between you and Mike, we're in excellent, excellent hands. All right, next item on their agenda is our treasurer's report, which includes consideration of financial statements, current bills payable, and the third quarter budget reconciliation. Sophie, our esteemed treasurer.
Why, hello. The Finance Committee met earlier today. I think most everybody was there for that, but let's review it for the record. We looked at our current cash position as of September 30th. We had $7,801,162.67 in the bank. We talked at the meeting about a different way to book our revenues coming in. And I think we're going to make some changes with that, and also make some changes to some cash account names. We went through the receivables, both dues receivables and tip fee receivables, because we are now billing and collecting the tip fee payments. One of the things that we did talk about was the provision in our agreements that allows us to offset amounts owed to us with the dividend checks. So those members who owe us money for a period of time might find their dividend checks being held until we are made whole. I'm sure Mike will begin having some of those conversations with members. And we talked about accounts payable. We have $32,726.77. They are all the normal bills: health insurance, legal bills, bookkeeping. Our bookkeepers are doing a fabulous job. We've doubled their work, and they are treating us very well. And rent, and of course our technical advisor payment in there. The group recommended that we go ahead and suggest to the board that we pay our bills, which is always a good thing. The bill that we did not talk about, and I did not add to the budget, we might want to have a conversation, Mike, at some point about the tax bill.
Yes, I did request the information. The tax bill was due, and I talked to Hamden yesterday. They're struggling putting it together, but they said I spoke with Gail at the office, and she's putting everything together for me and sending it over. But the tax bill for the property over at Coastal Resources, once again, is due. So that's going to have to be a conversation, whether it's a conversation that the board has and we need to take care of that and then negotiate it with the bondholder trustee at closing, or so be it. But we're going to have that conversation sooner than later.
And then the last conversation we had at the committee meeting was just recognizing the incredible work that Mike and George are doing for us. We have a lot more financial activity than we normally have had, and they are, Mike's doing a great job, and George, we come to expect everything down to the penny, and he keeps us on track, which is great.
Yes, I will say George does not like rounding off. Round off person, so he's teaching me well.
Great. So thank you, Sophie. I guess at this point, we're looking for a motion to approve the bills payable.
I approve $32,726.77 in payables for payment. And that includes an amount of $114.53 that's already been paid to Verizon.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. John, will you call the roll, please?
Sure. Dana,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Irene, I think you're on mute, Irene.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Bob,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
and Karen.
Yes. All right, thank you, everybody. Moving on, our next item is the approval of the slate for the 2020 MRC Board of Directors election. And we put out nomination forms, I think about a month and a half ago, Mike. And I believe we received just 3 nominations. We can receive up to 9. We did receive 3, and we do have 3 vacancies. Every year we have 3 positions that reopen. And so, want to report the names to us?
Yes, the 3 nominations we received was Sophie Wilson, Orono Town Manager, Kevin Howell, Carmel Town Manager, and Melissa Doan, Bradley Town Manager.
Wow. Well, that's great. So thank you all for putting your hats in the ring. We appreciate that greatly, especially to Melissa, who's a new name to the list. Thank you very much, Melissa, for, hi there. And I just would like to say Ralph from Millinocket has served, I don't know how many years you've served on the board, Ralph, but we understand that retirement is in your future. So we'll have you here for a little bit while longer, but we do wish you well in your new endeavors. And again, Melissa, thank you very much for agreeing to participate. So with that, we typically do approve the slate, even though it's really, there's not too much to approve, but I will accept a motion to approve that slate that was read out by Mike.
I'll move the officers.
All right, we got a motion and a motion, so I'll call that a motion in a second.
All right.
And John, you want to call the roll?
Sure. Dana,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Irene,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
and Karen.
Yes. Thank you. And again, we'll be sending out, what do we call them, ballots shortly. And people will, or communities will have until mid-December-ish to send in their ballots. We'll have more information about that with the mailing of ballots.
Yes. I'll probably have those out around the 1st of November, Karen, and then that would give everybody 30 days with them.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay. Mike, you are up with the executive director report and hopefully some nice updates on how things are going with regard to reopening the facility. I know everybody's anxious to hear about that.
No pressure there. Thank you, Karen. We'll start with member tonnage update. Members ton in comparison with last year's versus this year's. Last year's third quarter was 24,477 tons of MSW. In this year's third quarter was 24,621 tons. That's about 150 tons greater this year than third quarter of last year. Year over year, in 2019, MSW tons were 63,240 at this time last year, and currently this year, year to date, they are 61,681. That's a difference of 1,560 tons less this year than over last year. Coastal facility buyer update. MRC has now seen the proposals from prospective buyers and has recently had 2 conference calls with bondholders and the trustees. The first call went reasonably smoothly, and bondholders trustee explained how they ranked and would like to proceed with the remaining bidders. The bondholders would like to proceed with a prepackaged bankruptcy sale once a bidder selection is finalized. I understand this type of purchase would allow the buyer to execute a deal with bondholders without the worries of future liens and debtors occurring after the deal has been closed. The next call was a little more detailed and specific. MRC left that call with the MRC scheduling time to interview the remaining bidders and putting a letter of intent, an LOI together on how MRC foresees the deal structured. MRC has completed its interviews with the remaining bidders, which we have asked some pretty detailed operational and financial capability questions. MRC has sent bondholders trustee our LOI, and we have also notified them of the bidder the MRC would like to move forward with. Fiberite has also provided the MRC with a letter recently, which reaffirms Fiberite's commitment to supporting the MRC in the process of bid selection and the successful restart of the plant. The next phase will be to negotiate with bondholders on what is called the waterfall. This will be on how funds will get allocated at closing to debtors and lien holders. Facility update. The coastal facility is in good shape and we look forward to getting it restarted again. Receiver John Thibodeau is currently working with staff on what needs to be winterized with cold weather coming upon us, and has recently received bids for snow plowing around the facility area. The on-site staff ensures everything is maintained by turning motors and belts occasionally so things stay lubricated and don't seize up. MRC has been working with Hamden Code Enforcement and Public Safety Office on Coastal's occupancy permit issues. They have been great to work with and much progress has been made with CES's help resolving these problems. MSW bypass update. MRC has had recent meetings with PERC and Waste Management in regards to the current bypass situation. All parties revisited their existing temporary agreements and have been able to agree on a new short-term agreement that works for everyone while we are working towards reopening the coastal facility. I also want to remind everybody that the member contracts are still in effect while waste is being bypassed and you need to use your designated site. Both PERC and Waste Management have been great to work with and have been more than accommodating to the MRC and its members, and we sincerely thank them for all their cooperation. I'm still working with the receiver daily and meeting with DEP every Monday to provide updates. That's all I have at this time. I want to thank all the members for their patience. And as you can imagine, it's crazy busy. But if you have any questions for myself or one of the board members, then please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We'd be happy to help you and address any concerns that you may have. That's all I have for the executive update.
Can I ask a question? Oh, on the waste collection, we did an update with Jim Dunning earlier this week on our automated trash collection, but one of the comments that he made was that Bangor has had a leveling off despite increases in pandemic waste, residential household waste. Are you seeing that? And are we seeing a decrease in commercial waste collections?
So in the beginning of COVID, we saw a big decrease in commercial and a big spike in residential. Residential is leveling off. Commercial is still down, but it's not down as much as it was. By no means. It's still down a bit, but not the big dip it took when COVID first started.
Thank you.
Answer your question? Yeah.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mike? Mike, you're doing an amazing job. I know you've got about 50 balls in the air at any given time, and how you're managing to keep track of them all, I really don't know, but we greatly appreciate all of your time and effort, which really is, it's a 7-day-a-week job for you, it seems, which it really shouldn't be. And I'm glad to hear that you're going to be taking some R&R next week and at the end of this week to see if you can meet up with a few birds up north. So
yes,
it's well deserved.
Thank
and
you.
It sounds like things are in a good position for you to do that and take that time and be able to relax with the way things have been set up and structured. It looks like the ball's really in the bondholder trustees court right now for a little bit while they're working on finalizing that. Is that more or less how you would put it?
Yes, definitely. We have done what was asked of us with the interview process. Our letter of intent, which is how we would like to see the deal structured and certain debtors taken care of and all that stuff. So they have seen all that, and definitely the ball's in their court right now.
Great. All right, so it doesn't seem like we have any other board members that are interested in making any comments or have any questions for Mike. So we'll move on, and you can give us an update on the Bouchard Way Road.
The update on Harold Bouchard Way Road is on Monday. The town of Hamden voted to accept the road, and they accept the road immediately. So we did have to do a side agreement, and what that side agreement states is there's always been an issue of debris and especially nails on the road. So the road will need to be, once the facility reopens, the road will need to be swept, which as the landlord, we will put that on the tenant, has a responsibility at a certain amount of time. But we also wrote that agreement so that if it can be managed. I think a lot of it is actually coming out, not on the way in. It's on their crash bumpers of the truck, because I've witnessed it. So hopefully we can put some policies into place, or the new tenant can put some policies into place so that can be avoided. Also, the agreement is when the new tenant comes in, we have to turn the pump station back on. And so what we wrote is we would turn the pump station back on. Right now it's locked out, tagged out, and we have the keys to that. We would turn it back on, and we would be responsible for any repairs that would be needed due to turning it back on if something were to break. And we've requested that Hamden have a town official there to witness that. So they've accepted the road with those two stipulations. And I don't think, I mean, I feel that I quickly ran them by one of the officers. I don't feel it was too much to ask. And we don't have to plow the road now. So that's all good news. Tony?
Mike, accepting the road means they've also accepted the pump station, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Can I ask I just need to ask a stupid question, because I don't really get the nail thing, and why are the nail things on the bumpers going out and not coming in? Just
so what they're doing, it's mostly coming off of roll-offs in the trucks that dump, Kathy. And what it is all trucks have a crash bumper, and Coastal, there's a scale, wasn't required them to sweep the bumper off. And as soon as they hit those spots that we fixed in the road, they're almost like little speed bumps. It vibrates off and goes into the road. Most of the debris that we have found is on the way out, not on the way in.
Interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, so.
Well, that's great, Mike. That's a significant milestone for that piece of infrastructure to be passed on appropriately to the town of Hamden. It's also great for the town of Hamden because now all of that property out there that Mr. Bouchard owns is now accessible to development, which I'm sure makes him happy, and of course will make the town of Hamden happy as well. So
I called Mr. Bouchard as soon as the road was accepted after the town meeting, and he is very happy that that's taken care of. So now
early Christmas present for him.
Yes, I'll work with Jonathan to finalize everything. There's a piece that needs to be finalized. That's not a big deal, just a right-of-way thing for Mr. Bouchard. But now that the road's been accepted, we can take care of that in a very efficient manner.
Yeah, just two quick points just to add on. Number one, in terms of the nail and their cleanup, that really stems from the condition of approval from the Hamden Planning Board. So that's always kind of been there as a requirement. This just has a, what Mike mentioned, the side agreement, cleaning that up, that's just really implementing that. And the other is, just to refresh the board's memory, about 2 years ago, the board did vote and authorize to move forward with presenting the road and sewer for acceptance, including executing all documents. The executive director, now Mike, and the president, now Karen, were both authorized to do that. So I don't think there's no board vote required for that. I just wanted to mention that previously the board did vote to authorize that in case anyone had any questions or doubt.
Bob?
I was just wondering who Harold Bouchard is and why the road's named after him.
Bouchard's Trucking. is right across the street, and he owned the land. And Harold, it's currently, that was his father, and he wanted to name the road after his father.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any committee reports, Mike? There's not been a lot of activity in that regard.
I just thought I'd share an update so that the members see that you know, we're doing everything we can. I'm very proud of the MRC for all the communication that they have put out during this. So I wanted to update on at least the communication committee. A couple of things that have happened since last quarter is the E2 Tech Talk Trash webinar was September 16th, and George Aronson, the MRC technical consultant, sat on the panel and gave a phenomenal presentation on behalf of the MRC. About 150 folks attended this webinar. So thank you, George, for the excellent representation that you gave. Over the last couple months, I've been attending some town council meetings. Things are starting to pick up again, whether it be via Zoom or in port or in person. Karen actually attended one with me also. So some of the ones I've gone to and Karen's attended also was Dexter, Lee, Blue Hill, and Clifton. In the third quarter, the MRC has sent out 18 constant contacts to members and held 2 town hall meetings. So that's just a communication update I wanted to say on the committees.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we're getting close to public comment. Before we do that, I just wanted to let folks know that we do anticipate having our next virtual town hall meeting in November. Likely mid-November is when something might have transpired with regard to more progress on the reopening of the plant that we'll have to report on. And also we do have our annual membership meeting that will take place in December. We have not determined the date yet, but most likely it will be probably December 9th, which is a Wednesday, or the following Wednesday. I think it's December 16th. So keep your eye out for information about that. That's when the results of the election will be reported, and we'll be providing another update and an annual review of activities for our members. Both of those we anticipate will be virtual. So with that, we have come to the public comment section of the agenda. And I'll remind folks, if you'd like to make a comment, that you can indicate that interest in the chat section. And if we don't have any public comments, we will be going into executive session.
We do have one.
We do have one? Okay.
Yes.
I don't see anything, so.
So this is from Larry Sikora, and it says, is the MRC choice of 3 prospective buyers the same as the bondholders at this point?
I'll let Mike address that.
Just go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to jump in. I'd say it's really hard to say one way or the other. And frankly, I don't think it would be appropriate to get into the details of ongoing negotiations. So I don't think it's appropriate to answer that in any detailed way. Rest assured that from MRC's perspective, and I've seen it, you know, Mike and George, as well as any board member officers get involved, are taking the steps necessary to protect MRC's interests. And it's, of course, we're advocating for our members. You know, we're all together in this. So just like any negotiation, there always will be inevitably, you know, differences of perspectives. That's very natural and expected. But I'm hopeful that we will continue to have productive discussions and move towards a new owner through a sale.
Yes, I agree with that answer, John. So, yes. George, did you have something you wanted to add?
Sounds good to me. I think that categorizes where we are very well.
Okay. Super.
Anything else that you see out there, Jess, in terms of the comments from anybody who's attending?
There are no additional comments right now in the chat or on Facebook Live.
Okay, great. So for the benefit of our folks in the audience, we will be going into executive session. We do anticipate at least one item that we'll be considering coming out of it. It's the review of the extension letter regarding integral capabilities for performance test protocol. It's an item that we've taken up at the last several regular meetings. And other than that, right now, that's the only item we're expecting to have after the executive session. And then we would be adjourning. Before we go, if we take the motion to go into executive session, I would just like to thank again our executive director and our consultants for doing an amazing job, John and George. Also, I know we do have representatives from Waste Management and PERC on the call today, and I would like to extend thanks to them as well for working with us through this, challenging transition time and being great partners and working together for the benefit of the region as a whole. We do appreciate it, and we really do thank you for that. So with that, the board members and I believe George, Jonathan, and Felicia will be going into a breakout room to conduct an executive session. And then we'll be returning to this space again when we are done with the executive session. The executive session, I anticipate, will probably last, Mike, perhaps at least maybe 30 minutes?
30 to 45 minutes, I'd say, Karen.
30 to 45 minutes. There you go. Okay. And so folks that will be going into executive session, you should have received a request to join the breakout room. So you can click join, and then you'll be entered into the executive session breakout room.
But before we
need
click
to-
on that,
We need to do with a motion. Sorry. I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Yeah, I need to read it, Tony.
I don't have it in front of me. I was hoping to get away with it.
Executive session per 1 MRS 4056E to consult with MRC's legal counsel regarding MRC's contractual rights and duties. Was that the motion?
So moved. Yes.
Second it.
And a second. A motion and a second. And you'll call the roll, John?
Yes, Dana,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Irene,